Wait a minute.
Hi, Joe.
He went out and had another plate.
Yeah, he's something.
Oh, he is.
I'm glad he's doing okay, though, right? I'm glad to hear that, even though he's doing it.
I'm gonna blacken your view.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Vicky.
Welcome to the last men's breakfast of the season until January. We're really lucky today that we have 3 experts that are going to talk to us about the town hall project. We have Bill Yukna, who's shrugging his shoulders. We have Bill Caspara and Bob Cutler. I've passed out I didn't give you one. I passed out index cards with pencils. There's a lot of information to go over. So I'm asking if you have a question, write it down. We'll have 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. But please hold your questions just because there's so much stuff to go over. But write it down so that you don't forget what it is that you have to ask.
Are you insinuating that we wouldn't remember?
I'm insinuating I wouldn't remember, so I'm trying to offer you what I would offer myself.
That's the
Okay,
problem.
so
You forget
without
what
further
you
ado, I'll turn it over to Bill Yukna.
Vicky uses the term experts pretty loosely, so I think I've met most of you in the past, and you know, from my perspective, I obviously represent the building committee for the town itself. It's a 9-member board. It's made up of citizens, obviously. We're lucky enough, Merrill sits on it, has for 100 years, Merrill?
35.
35, okay. But so we have a pretty broad representation on that committee as well. We've sat through obviously most of the buildings that have been built in this town. Anything that's been renovated in the last 14 years I've been on, which you know will give you the Ahern, the Joint Public Safety Building, the library, the high school. Well, we didn't really do this building though. We weren't really involved in it. You know, so you know we're kind of involved with most of the buildings that have been updated in this town over the last 14 years. We have varying degrees of buildings that have been built. Obviously, if you look back, there is almost all of the buildings in town were built at around the same time. There's about a 40 to 50 year time frame in which everything was done 40 or 50 years ago. All these buildings were built. And there were varying degrees of how they were built. I would say the high school as an example, the original library, the main portion of the library, were probably 2 of the finest architecturally and designed and structurally designed buildings. There's absolutely nothing wrong with those buildings if you maintain them. They should last, you know, forever, other than your updates that you would typically do. If you look at some of our other schools, we had, you know, where the Sage School is currently, probably was one of the I would say, not as well built buildings, and when we finally came to a determination of what to do with it, it made more sense to get rid of it than to try to keep it as a long-term solution for the town. Not that we thought we would need it on the school side. So some buildings were built better than others, and you'd look at them really from that perspective. The existing town hall that we have, from an outside point of view and from a you know, New England point of view, I think everybody loves. And I can appreciate that, and I truly understand the way it looks, the way it fits in with the town. It's kind of the way you would expect any building that we built within this town to look. You wouldn't expect us to build a very modern building. The library on the other side was very different when it was built originally. It was not a traditional New England style building, and therefore any addition you put onto it, you know, you were going to basically have to do something that was not going to be traditional New England, and kind of keep that design looking moving forward. So when we approached this building, I think, and Merrill could actually correct me on this one if I'm wrong, but I think the entire building committee looked at the original building saying, this is a building we want to keep. What are we going to need to do to it? And what does the program have to fit within this building? One of the first concepts that came up was you know, we moved things out of there, so obviously the size of the building should be fine. We obviously moved the police and the police department out of it, dispatch moved out of it, and we're talking now about moving the water department. But when you look at the space, and I think the police department's a good example of this, when you look at the space that the police department originally had, lower level of this building, part of that was a garage, part of it was cells, so really only about 50% of that lower level was the actual operations of the police department. If you now transpose to where they are in the current building, the size differential is phenomenal. And it's because of the way we operate differently now. You look at the way our police department is an entire area just for detectives and all of their evidence and all of the way they operate. There's another area basically for the patrolmen and how they operate, and again, keeping things separate because you have to have controls and you have to have the ability to store things separately and keep it for legal reasons. You look at the administrative suite that's there. The administrative suite itself, with its own conference room, you know, the chief's area, his assistants and stuff like that, is almost about 50% of the size of the office area that used to be used in the old building. And I think anybody who walks in there and actually sees what we try to do with that building, and again, we have the elephant in the town, which is the joint the public venue up on Route 1. We get a lot of demands, and that's why that space has changed over time. Town Hall is no different than that. We're looking at taking out the water department, which right now is in an area probably the equivalent of this little area right here. And we're looking at moving him into another building, and obviously we're going to move the DPW group altogether. But that building is going to be about 4 times the space that they currently have. And why is that? It's because of the types of records we have to retain. It's because of the way we're trying to do our work. When all of these buildings were built, we didn't have computer equipment. We didn't have the requirements for all that, which has its own data rooms where you have to put the stuff to run it. Your desk size becomes a little different because now you have something sitting on the desk as well as having to have a work area. All these things have changed over the last 40 and 50 years. And our schools are no different than that. I didn't have computer labs 40 years ago when the high school was built. So now I have to be able to take other rooms and repurpose them and push people aside that way. So that's what happens in a lot of these buildings. But when the building committee originally looked at it, we liked the design, we liked the way the building looked, and we were looking to see what the issues were going to be. We did hire KBA architecturally. We've worked with them. They did the joint public safety building with us. They did the high school with us. And we hired them through a designer selection to basically do an analysis of the building that we had, of each of the departments. And so, we met with each department head and, what is it that you need today? What is it that you think you're going to need as we move down the road? I think one of the values that the building committee has brought to the town for years now is that when you ask us to do a building, and remember, this is not the building committee saying we want to do this building, whether it's a selectman or the council on aging or somebody comes to us and says, we want to do something here. What should we be doing? When you ask us to look at this, we look at it from not only what are we taking today, but what does this have to fit in this building over the next 20, 25 years? And we're not going to build something that can only handle today's structure, because if we do that, and I turned around to you in 3 years and said, oh, by the way, I need an addition, you'd all look at us like we were fools, like we didn't plan for something. So what happens when we look at any one of our buildings is we look at what are the requirements. And I'm going to give you a perfect example on that will show you why it's not just going to be something like the town hall, but take the Burrell School, which is one of our next projects that we know we've been requesting the state to take a look at. I know right now, and I've already put it in the proposal, I need 2 more classrooms on that building to do it right. Because we do have preschool, which we never had, when that building was built years ago. It's a requirement of the state, it's under the special needs requirements, and it's basically an issue that now I have lost other rooms within that building that I can't operate under. So the right way to do this is to design that building with that additional space from day one, try to get the state reimbursement and try to get the whole process. I'm not just going to come to the town and say, I just want to renovate that building and not be able to meet the needs of the program as we move forward. So the same thing came up here, and we looked at a lot of the departments. And Bob made a very good point when he was looking back at something, but the original building that was built, when you take out the police department and dispatch down below, was built for basically 11 people on the upper level. We have 35 people that work in that same space at this point in time. If you look at the record retention, and again, I think Bob can speak to this better than I can, when you look at the record retention, even though we keep saying we're going to paperless, the state doesn't allow us to go to paperless. They require us to keep original documents, whether it's a birth certificate or a marriage certificate, we have to keep originals. And so therefore, there's a certain amount of storage. And if you think about it and you say, okay, well, the town really hasn't grown. People have come, people have gone, and you start getting a volume of people. There's 16,000, 17,000 people in Foxborough. Next year, it won't be the exact same 17,000 people. Some people will have left, some new people will come in, their documents will come with them, and we'll be moving the process along as we go forward here. So we have record retention, which has to be readily accessible. You walk in there and say, I need to see my you know, my marriage license. I can't say, well, come back in a week, we're gonna go find it for you. They have to go get it for you. And so therefore, all that information has to be accessible. When you look at most of our departments right now, their functionality, the way, and I'll use treasurer collector is probably one of the easiest ones for all of you to see when you go in to pay a bill. If you just look inside there, the reason it's so cluttered in design and look is just because they put 2 extra people in there that area wasn't built for. So they have workstations for 2 extra people, they have all the storage that goes along with those 2 extra people, and everything starts to get on top of each other. So I think when KBA did the original design on this, and you know, I'll be honest with you, the first number, when you ask anybody what they would like, so if I go to any department and I say, what would you like? Obviously, I'm going to get this whole room. When I say, what do you need? I get half the room. And when I say, what can you live with? I get, you know, a lot less than that. So, you know, you start with the grand plan so you can at least understand what the department heads are thinking about and where they're going with the process. And you can see where they're saying, well, you know, maybe 5 years from now we think we might need this person, or I know I'm going to need this amount of storage. And by doing that, we went through about 8 reiterations to go from about 22,000 down to the 17,000. So the number has transposed. Obviously 22,000 was not something this town would ever accept, and maybe the 17,000 isn't something the town will accept, but we knew it had to move down. The existing building's about 13,000 square feet. So we're looking at about a 4,000 square foot difference. Some of the biggest issues in that, obviously, are the meeting room. Just like you're lucky enough to have this room and the room next door, and you use it quite often. I've been in here, and it seems to always have people moving back and forth. Our meeting rooms throughout the town are heavily used. My assistant on the school side basically spends about 25% of her time in the fall doing nothing but scheduling the schools for people who want to meet. PTOs, sports groups, outside, you know, venues who obviously will charge if they come in, but all day long she's getting requests to use our space. You know, obviously at this point the selectmen are using the media center, which is the same thing the school committee uses for its night meetings. So our different rooms get used quite a bit. The space over at the Joint Public Safety, originally in design, there was a lot of debate about the size of that. We settled on a size that we were all very comfortable with, could do the trainings that they needed to do, bringing their entire staff in. It's really what generated the size of that room. And there was a lot of conversation, was that too big? You walk in that room now, it's used pretty much every single day of the year. It's used by not just the Joint Public Safety, you know, whether it's police or fire, but it's used by lots of groups in town that asked to register. Last night, they had a meeting there, it was actually double booked. They had to try to move people out of that area because that's how much it's trying to be used. But the size of the room is actually, I think, very appropriate. It works perfectly for when they have the venues that they're supposed to have. So could we shrink the meeting room on this? Of course we could. The question is, will it meet the needs that you have down the road? There are a lot of meetings we have, if they get contentious, that room is barely that we have now is not big enough, and that's why they were looking to make it slightly larger on this. One of the other issues that we faced when we looked at the building itself was bringing things up to code. And Dick and the ad hoc committee, as well as us, have labeled that there's a number of issues within the building. And just like there have been a number of issues within every single building that we've touched in this town. We've always had to deal with the asbestos. We're going to have to deal with that no matter what building we have, no matter what we do. If we tear the building down, or if we, you know, build and just renovate it, I have to get rid of asbestos, period. I have to get rid of the lead that's in the attic. That's a given, and Dick's made that point, we've made that point. That's going to happen in this project no matter what you do. Those things have to be taken care of. The things with seismic, you know, obviously the house I could have built 50 years ago compared to the house I can build today is very different. The building codes have continued to get stricter and stricter. They are concerned about heavy wind loads. They're concerned about, you know, seismic issues if we were to have an earthquake. And so they want to know that the building's going to stand up. And so the design requirements on this building, if it were to be built today, is very, very different than the building that's standing up there. So again, we looked at it from the perspective of, okay, so what do we have to keep doing to this building to now make this building what we want it to be in the future? One of the biggest stumbling blocks I think the building committee ran into, and that I know there's difference of opinion on this one, but the lower level of this building, had it had about another foot of basement height, not dissimilar to what you have here, if it was another foot deeper, you could do a lot more within that structure as far as making office space appropriate in head heights, you know, having ceilings and lighting, not having to have exposed ceilings. And I know You walk into a lot of the renovations of mills and old factories, and they have the exposed ceilings. A lot of those are 12-foot ceilings. It looks nice. You've got a lot of grandeur to it. This is an area that once you do all of what you need to do, at least in our perspective from the mechanicals and things of that nature, ceiling heights become very tight, and you're working in an area that's not really the type of atmosphere that you're trying to generate, and that you're spending a lot of money on. So that became one of our biggest things. And on the seismic side, again, having to build effectively an envelope inside of this building, that's steel, that's going to hold the building up to the seismic issue, is also, it can be done. Almost anything can be done if you're willing to spend the money on it. But it also creates, some space issues inside. We're now going to have beams and stuff in against outer walls, which is going to make setting up furniture and stuff a little bit more difficult, and you're not going to be as optimized as you can possibly be. One of the things that KVA tried to do in this design here, while this is a study, it's no different than the library. We had a similar thing on the library where we had this level of planning done before we went to town meeting. That is not exactly what we ended up building, because when the final architect comes in and tries to work out all of the issues within the design, they start to realize there are things that, from a coordination point of view, that don't work as well. And they start to adjust the building. It could be in a conversation within the departments that they find out that an area doesn't need to be the size it is, or you don't need to have a specific room. And they continue to adjust the building. So just like the library, this is not exactly, and I want to be very clear on this, because I got beat up on a couple of the buildings where we did things and people said, well, that's not exactly what you showed us at town meeting. Right now, it will not be exactly this plan, even if this is the final design that we go with. Because things do get changed when you get into these final level of plan design and coordinations, how your plumbing is working, how your HVAC is working. It makes things adjust within the building, and you do it so that it works right. It's a concept. It's getting as close to what we think is what's needed. It shows amount of workstations, so that if somebody wants to go in there and count and say, okay, how many do I have in the finance area? How many do you currently have? They can mentally look at it and say, okay, it lays out right. Oh, I see you've got one more position in there. Are you expecting to hire somebody? That's what this kind of a plan is meant to do. It's meant to show you basically what are we talking about and how are we building our square footage. One of the things, and when you look at this L-shaped design and whether you like it or not, one of the reasons a lot of these types of designs are done this way is to get as much light into the building as you possibly can. Obviously, you could make this one square and have interior offices, throughout the whole building, which, again, from a working point of view, are not as nice as having an area where you can see natural light come into a building. So a lot of times, the designer and architect will do is try to take as much light in. And similar, if you look at every single room in this building, there's natural light that comes into every single room. And again, that's a how you operate, how you work environment type of thing that you're trying to adjust. So I think overall, again, will this maybe become even a rectangle by the time we're done to try to collapse the size of it or whatever? That's possible. It may not be as employee friendly at that point as we would like it to be, but if that's what the town is looking for us to do, is downsize this or push this thing down, then that's an option we have, because this is nothing more than two drawings sitting on a piece of paper at this point. This has not been taken to the next step, which is what we're asking for the money to do, which is to design the entire thing out and get to a final that we actually go out to bid on. One of the things that was very important to most of the departments, and it makes sense, and it was the same concept that the library came up and sold to the town, was that we're not going to hire people. Okay? How is the library going to basically double its size and not hire people? There's only one way. You had to make sight lines that worked. So if you walk into the library now, you've got that nice central desk that's right there. They can see in every direction on that lower level. You go to the next level, the next desk can see in every level on that first floor there. And you go up to the upper level, and that desk can see everything on that level. Well, if you didn't do that, if you tuck things over into a corner, now all of a sudden you have one employee who's trying to see an entire building. If they leave their station, they can't. And so, again, to maintain staffing, sight lines are always very important. So one of the things that KVA was asked to do in this was to look at office spaces and determine whether or not, if the people were working out in an area, so let's say these people were at lunch, and that the only person that was left is the town manager or the resource manager, they are able to see effectively from their office into where a sight line would be. Same thing happens throughout finance and assessors. Every one of these can see to where the counter is. So all that's doing is giving you an ability to let your staff not be there and not to have double coverage, but somebody can still see that there's a customer waiting. And we're all customers in this case. We're all the ones going to be at that counter that don't want to wait for someone to show up because they can't see that we're there. So that was one of the requirements that KBA was given, was basically make it so our staff can stay our staff and they can still have access and view what's going on. The other thing that there's been a fair amount of debate about is, why do we need offices? I've worked for 30 years in the private sector, and I've worked in both environments. I've worked in the bullpen environment where this whole building would be wide open and we'd all have cubicles and you all had work to do. And in some parts of our business that works fine. If you go into the treasurer's office, the 4 or 5 people they're doing very similar jobs. Even though there's phone calls that will interrupt them and stuff, they can handle it. You get to some of these other positions, and I'll tell you right now, myself, I'll use my own example. I have a small office over at the administration building at the ICO to run the school business side of it. If I couldn't get up and shut that door once in a while to concentrate, I have a state report that takes me almost 3 weeks to do. If I couldn't shut that door and people just kept walking in my door every 5 minutes, it'd take me about 3 months to do it. All right? That's the type of stuff that does happen. The other side, which I feel is something that the town really has to get a grip on and feel comfortable with one way or the other, is there's a lot of activities that happen in a town hall that personally I don't want to share with you and you don't want to share with me. You're walking in there, you're looking for an abatement. You think that from either a senior side that you qualify for the senior tax abatement thing, or from an income point of view you qualify. You don't want to have that conversation with 3 of us standing over your shoulder looking to do something else. You want to be able to go and that person brings you into the office, has that conversation, resolves the issue, and walks away. And nobody else knew what that conversation was about. And they take care of doing what they're supposed to. It gets into the data files, and you've got your abatement, or you get your letter on it, but nobody else knew what that conversation was about. And I think that's extremely important. That's how a town hall is used. This is, while we do a lot of public work, we're doing it in the environment where you should be able to feel very comfortable when you go in to do it. The other piece that keeps coming up along that lines as far as the amount of space is, the size of this building for 35 people. And I guess this one kind of gets me probably the most. This building is not built for 35 people. If it is, I'd take this building and put 35 people in here and we'd be done. The issue here is every one of us that comes into that building all day long. And when I say all day long, really what I'd like them to do is put a counter and start doing accounting for a month, because especially when May 1st comes and the tax bills come, you'll see hundreds of people coming through that building in a day. Pay their bills, pay their water bills, pay their tax bills, go through that. It's the fact that we have customers. No different than a library, no different than a retail store. What effectively this building is built for is us as taxpayers, our usage of that building. And yes, in the background, they're doing all of the detailed work that we need them to do. They're keeping all the records that we ask them to keep, and they're processing everything the way we want to keep it. But it's so that you and I can go basically in there and get whatever information we desire. I want a building permit. I want, to go to the town clerk and get a marriage certificate. I need to do this, that, and the other. It's our walking in that really creates part of the issue in the size of this building. If it were the case of what square footage per person, which is one of the things that the advisory committee seems to be getting really stuck on, the library would be about 100th of the size it is, because there's what, 18 people that work there? It's not the staff that works there, it's you and I going in to use the facility that creates the size of that building. So that's really, when you start to look at the design, that's the issues that come up. And I think when we looked at the initial design of the original building, and we looked at the amount of work that we needed to do to that building, and what were we trying to save, in the end, all we were trying to save was the facade, the way it looked from the outside. And while a lot of things could have been done over the years, and a lot of things should have been over the years, it's probably one of the areas that the ad hoc committee and the building committee agree 100% on. The maintenance on the existing building just was non-existent, and has been for years. That's not something I can control, and it's not something anybody else in the control other than the town administration should
Does
have
that
done.
relate to all the other public buildings in town?
Um,
No maintenance?
It did In some cases, like the fire department, the actual firemen took care of the building themselves.
Yeah.
And they had a number of people that were electricians, plumbers, and stuff like that, so they did the best they could do on that. But when you come to, I'll give you the perfect example, because I know it's under my purview under the school side. I control basically 550,000 square feet within the town. I have my own maintenance department, and we do our maintenance, and we do it daily. And we fix motors, and we fix lights, and we, fix floors, and we fix ceilings, and we do that every single day of the year, 360 days out of the year, 365 days out of the year. What we have done, since I've been involved, is we've also pushed that maintenance department up. They do the joint public safety. They go out to the joint public safety building and they resolve issues that are going on there. They work with the chiefs to make sure that they have the right service contracts in place. The library, my whole staff has been trained on how to run all of the equipment within that library and how to maintain that library. And my feeling is, although we don't have formal agreements at this point between the town and the schools, I'm the only one who has a maintenance department. So I'm going to use it to the best I can to supply the needs to the entire town. I don't have enough manpower to do everything, but we'll keep all the critical stuff up and we'll try to contract out the things that we can't do. So there's been a shift, but I can't go backwards and fix something that hasn't been done on this particular building for years. So again, once we upgrade it and get it into good working shape, my assumption is, and actually my maintenance department over the last couple of years has been going in there doing minor things, but they haven't, they don't have the budget to go in there and start, ripping things apart. But, my assumption is that we will somehow have to work to an agreement to that building being under our purview as well, to maintain it. I think any one of the buildings, and you see this happening in a lot of towns where they've gone to a centralized maintenance group, obviously for the schools, it's going to be their priority that they control that because we control the most square footage. And we need to make sure, I will say right now, and I remember when my kids were at the high school, my son's 29, my daughter's 27. I remember when they used to walk into the high school and it was, the floors were dirty, the walls weren't painted, ceilings had leaks. It was really not a great atmosphere. And about, I guess it was about 10 years ago, we hired Michael Leary and brought him into town as our operations manager within the schools. And the reason, I sat on the committee that hired him, the reason we hired him and the reason I was very comfortable with him over some of the other candidates, he came out of the hospital industry. He knew things had to be clean. That was a requirement of his job there. He knew things had to be maintained, heat, electric, all that stuff had to be up to scale because otherwise people died. So they had, he had a mentality that was really what you want to have in the building trade. When we went out to replace Mike because he retired, and I hired Tony Maselli, same industry I went for. I went back to say, who's worked in that industry? And he came out of that same industry, and he has the exact same mindset. You walk into any of our buildings, and if you don't see what I see, then give me a call, because I really want to know it. Our buildings are clean. Our buildings are well maintained. We take vacation times when kids aren't there. We paint, we do ceilings, we do whatever we need to get done on a regular basis, whether it's the Christmas break, the spring break, the summer break. So that's the type of work we're going to need to do on all of these buildings as we go forward. We're doing it on the joint public safety now, and as I said, my staff is also involved on the other one, so that's where we would hope to be with this. In the end, I think the building committee looked at the amount of changes, and even though you have a square foot, like a rectangular shaped building right now, it doesn't mean everything will lay out the way you would like it to within that square footage, and get all these sight lines and everything else that I've been talking about as far as how the departments would work. So when you can start with a clean slate and basically lay it out, and then the outside becomes what the outside becomes, because now you kind of laid out each office exactly the way you want it to kind of connect to each other, you don't have any limitations. Obviously, trying to renovate the existing building, I have limitations. I've got those walls are those walls, and I'm going to stay within them and make things fit. The seismic issue, the head height on the lower level, all those finally came to the point where the building committee said it doesn't make sense to us. We're spending too much money trying to save something and then not ending up where we want to end up. We want something that's 100% functional for the next 25 to 30 years that we don't have to think of. And every time I say 25 to 30 years, this was taken wrong at one point in time too. When I say that, I'm saying that from the perspective of the town, we're not coming back to you for 25 to 30 years to do anything on this building because we brought it all the way up to code. 30 years from now, things are going to need to be, there's going to be a major renovation of some sort that will need to be done, whether it's a new roof, whether it's new heating system. Things don't last forever. But if you maintain them, the structure should. We didn't look to replace the high school because you had a great structure. You built a beautiful building. That was all fine. What we needed to do was roofs, windows, heating systems, things like that that had basically lived their life. And that's what this building should be in the end. It should be something that goes 25 years where I'm not coming back to the town saying I need more money to do something with this building. But after that 25 years, again, you're going to be into normal maintenance that you would be just like you would be on your own home. And how do you deal with that? And I think most people feel if they get to 20 years on their own home, they've done well, but now they're looking at roofs, and they're looking at heating systems, and they're looking at things that way. And that's why we also look at the square footage. The square footage has to maintain that 25 years too. So even if I don't need the position today, but there's a chance that I'm going to need it 10 years from now or 15 years from now, to not look at that and say, okay, we should include that in at this point. If someone's going to say I don't need it for 20 to 25 years, then I'd say, okay, maybe we should just hold off, and if you need to do a renovation or an addition 25 years from now, that's different. But if it's 5 to 10 years, and that they think that there really is a position change that's going to happen here, then you really should include it in the plan, because otherwise, again, I'm selling the taxpayer short. I'm telling them I don't need something that we all know we're going to need at some point down the road. So I think overall, the building committee went from wanting to keep the existing structure and do an addition onto that, to saying that that doesn't make financial sense to us. We'd rather go this other route. And as it's been said, there are a number of features that whether I tear the building down or whether I renovate it, I have to do either way. So, those costs are going to be baked into this program no matter what. The question is, what do you end up with in the end? One of the big things, if I wanted to easily, I don't want to say easily, but if I wanted to knock square footage off, I could knock this whole lower level here, which is storage, off. But what am I telling you? That we're not going to keep records? That we're not going to maintain stuff? I think we would all agree that the low level of a building, your foundation levels, if done right, are your cheapest portion of your building. Because even if I were to do a slab in this area and just pour a concrete floor here, I'm still going in with 4 feet of foundation. The difference is going in with 8 feet of foundation. So it's not like it's like spend nothing, I'm still spending 50% of it to get there. Difference is I don't have to pour a concrete slab on top of this, but yes, I have to do all the truss roof, the truss systems across it and support the thing. But it's storage. It's that much storage that the town has available to it. Even with the size that we built the joint public safety, they're already having problems with storage, which is amazing to me. I mean, I've built entire areas for them to put storage in. But again, based on the needs of the town, they're already, putting more stuff in those storage areas than what we had anticipated when we built the building. So I think storage is a prime example of something that you really need to be careful of and make sure you maintain. Things that we don't have today, when you really look at the building itself. I mean, first of all, you start looking at our bathrooms, as configurations and as sizes. Right now, the men's room is a toilet and a urinal. The women's room is 2 toilets. And it's about a fraction of the size of what these areas are. That's the code. When we built the building, that's all we needed. Under the code today, based on use and occupancy, you end up with this many. This is not because we just thought it'd be nice to add 6 bathrooms on each level. It's because the code is requiring us to do this. So you end up chewing up more space in whether it's the renovation. And if I do the renovation, by the way, I still have to make that work. I still have to bring those bathrooms into that room, which means I'm eliminating other space that currently exists as office space. The elevator requirement, again, renovation or new. I have to have the space for that elevator going up and down between the 2 floors so that anybody who can't do it, whether it's somebody who's in a wheelchair or whether it's a young child issue, just like we have in the library, I need to have an elevator. I have no elevator in the existing building. That's more space that I lose. The issue around conference rooms, we effectively have no conference rooms in that building today. The only thing we have is the main meeting hall, which everybody said, well, that's fine, you can use that for your conference room. But if the conference room is being used by one group, that means nobody else can do anything with it. So in this design, not only do we have the meeting room, which again, any department could use during the day as a room to do their work with if they have people coming in, but we also have conference rooms that are built into the plan itself that department can do its work in and bring outside people in to sit and work with them. So again, that's more space that we're taking that the existing building does not have today. And again, if the town's concept is, well, we just want bare bones. We don't want any conference rooms. We want that building, that part of it to be half the size it is. That's fine, but it's somewhat short-sighted in what you're going to end up with. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, you're still gonna spend a lot of money, okay? It's not like you're gonna drop off and make this thing half the price of what we're talking about. You're still gonna spend a lot of money over the next 20 years, and you're not gonna have gotten the functionality out of the building that you were really trying to get out of it. So, you know, kind of wrapping this whole thing around, the building committee finally came to the end result that looking at the two different designs, looking at the issues that both faced, and we're not, you know, we want brand new everything, because that's not the way we operate. We operate within the constraints of what we have as a committee. We felt that in the end, the better buy for the town, and you know, I think it's very important to you also understand that in our price of the $8.6 million, we have about $1 million in contingency money right now. And that's typical to be where we would be based on the level of the plans at this point, because I don't have enough detail in this plans to know that, to feel confident that everything has been resolved and worked out. All I have is a schematic here. It would be like me drawing on a piece of paper here what your floor plan of your house is going to be and say, oh, I got everything figured out here. Here's the price it's going to cost me to build it. I don't think any builder would be dumb enough to do that. They would want to look at all the plans. How's the heating going to fit? What's the electrical you're looking for? How are you going to get this whole thing done? So in that $8.6 million, I've got about $1.1 million in contingency money. What typically happens, and has happened on every project we've done in this town, is we typically start off with 10%. I'm starting off with much more than that, because I don't even have a final design at this point. When I usually do the 10%, it's because I have a design that I'm working forward with. But I'm starting off with more than that. When we get to this design being completed, a lot of the issues, the coordination issues, will have been worked out, and therefore that contingency money starts to come down because I don't need as much anymore. Now I know that we've accounted for different things all the way through. And when we finally go out to bid, and we actually have a number, this is going to be one of the first times we've done this in the town, we would only carry a 5% contingency in the entire process. So let's say the bid goes out, and let's say the bid came back in at $7 million. I'd be looking to carry about $350,000 as contingency, because there's still some unknowns. I don't know what's in the ground when I start to dig. You know, the old school was back there. I may hit something there that's going to create some cost to me. I should obviously have almost all of my coordination issues should have been wrapped up because I've got bids on how they're going to build this thing. So that number comes down, and typical to any project we have done, whatever we don't spend of that, and the building committee looks at everything that comes in front of us as far as a change order. So in the library's case, they made a decision they wanted different furniture. They wanted much higher grade and they wanted more of it. We said, that's fine, the town's not paying for that. Get it out of the money that you're raising as a fundraiser. And we controlled the fact that they gave us back $160,000 back into the town's money. Because we said, no, you know, the town said that they're willing to spend X amount, you know, in our original budget on furniture. We're not letting you just kind of go hog wild. So they raised the money. If they want to raise money, they can do whatever they want. They can spend it any way they want throughout the process. So they did. And I think the furniture is gorgeous. I think they did a beautiful job on it. But you as a taxpayer didn't pay for it. We got that money back. So we look at everything, whether it's a change order that the contractor brings to us. And I got to be honest with you, contractors will always bring us stuff that, you know, the first thing is it truly a change order? We go through the plans, we find out that it's not really a change order, it was already accounted for, they owned it, we reject the change order. Or they give us a price for $10,000 to fix something, we go through all the cost estimates on it, it should only cost $5,000, we work out that we're only paying $5,000. So we're controlling every bit of the cost as we go through, and the intention is, in almost every case, and I know I'm going to get slammed on this, I'm going to just put it out there to start with, in every building that we've done in the last 14 years, we've given money back to the town that we didn't spend. The high school is the only exception to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Okay, I said I was going to address it, but on the high school, you know, and as much as I've gotten slammed on this, I want this to be very, very clear to everybody. The things that were done, there was the assumption that the town would not spend more than $20 million to renovate that building. That was what the school committee felt, which meant 10 of it was going to come from the town side, hopefully 10 of it coming from the state side. That was the magic number. When we actually were going out to bid, it was just as the economy was starting to change. Okay, so prior to that change, things were running pretty high. We did a lot of cutbacks, and some of them, to be honest with you, when I look back now, I think we're kind of stupid on our side, but it was the only way we thought we could stay under the $20 million. And I give you probably one of the basic examples was the bathrooms. We said we only need to change the tile on the walls where we're changing plumbing and stuff like that. You know, we'll survive with the tile on the other walls. Well, when the prices came in right, and everything dropped as much as it really did, and it was such a significant change in pricing in the industry that almost all the cost estimating changed after that as well. So if you had somebody actually estimating it the next year, their prices would have been lower because steel had gone down, everything had gone down in price, and they were reflecting it. When we were out, it was out based on what the economy was prior to that. We went back in and said, hey, we're gonna replace that tile on those walls and do the entire bathroom the way it should be, so that it's gonna look right. It's not gonna look like you did a patch job and you went through the process. That change alone, and think of the number of bathrooms I have in a high school, was $200,000 more in tile work. Would you as a taxpayer want to walk into that building and see that I half fixed something and that I might have problems down the road? The other big issue that I spent a lot of money on and the school committee, basically the building committee brought forward as an issue was the paving and curbing. The curbing virtually was cement curbing that had deteriorated where people were getting hurt walking off the edges. It was not in the original plan to be done because we didn't think we could get it done in the $20 million number. The pavement itself was deteriorated badly in all of the parking lots and stuff like that. Again, we didn't think we could get it done. Now we've got taxpayer money that says, renovate that building and don't come back to me for additional money. Am I not going to renovate that pavement and get it done so that I'm not coming back to the taxpayers again? So, we went through and we did all these things that basically bring the building up. I laugh because everybody walks into the auditorium now and they say, oh my God, I can see what I'm looking at because the old lighting was so poor in that room. Yes, we spent more money, and we redid all the lighting in the auditorium too. So it's 100% done. My point is that building is 100% now, not 90%. And I don't have to talk to you as taxpayers again for more money. You already gave it to me, it's done. The final thing, which is the turf field, which is basically taking about $880,000 of what we had left over in the end, went towards the turf field. That was a town meeting vote. As far as the school committee was originally going with it, they were not going to spend that money unless the town said yes. And so the reality here is, the town made the decision to spend that money, otherwise that would have come back. But on the Ahern, joint public safety, and even on the library, there's money coming back to the town, which will probably be put towards this project to reduce whatever debt load we go out on. And that's the way it's been done, and I'm sure Dick and even Merrill can talk to this because it's been done for years that way. You always roll the money out of one project back into the next project because I can't spend it on anything else. It can only be spent, once you bond money for this, it can only be spent on another project. It can't be just put back into, you could reduce one thing you could do is reduce the actual debt outstanding, but that's the only thing you could do. You can't go put it towards an operating budget or anything else of that nature. It has to go back into a capital. But that's the only building we've done that with since, at least I've been on the committee, and it was only done, again, to make the building 100%. I don't think there's anything we did in that building, at least I hope there isn't, that you walk through the building and say, wow, I can't believe they did that. Why would they waste the money on that type of thing? Everything we did was to bring that building up to 100% of what you had built originally and how it's now used. And I think, quite honestly, it came out very well. I mean, I had, every time someone who's walked in from out of town who looks at our high school, even though it's, as old as it is, looks at that high school, they're very impressed with how functional the building is and how well it works, and how clean and neat and operational it is. And even whether you're driving up the driveway and looking at the front of the building, through the parking and the curbing and the sidewalks, everything is done. It's not something that the town's going to have to come back to deal with until you get down a number of years from now when issues, obviously through wear and tear. So again, any money that comes out of the library will rotate back into this project, and that's the finance department will obviously have to deal with how much that is and where we go with it. We're coming down to the close on that project right now, and so, by the time we actually probably get to this point, that will be a known number as well. So I think from the building committee's point, that's kind of my pitch. I think one of the things I will tell you, there was an initial drawing that was done on how this building would look. It was a KVA concept. It was not at all what we intend to make it look like. We intend to make it look like a colonial building, similar to what you see today.
I was going to bring that up because
Yes.
it was in the paper.
Yeah.
It looked like some old factory.
Well, architects are trying to do something to give people ideas because a lot of people can't visualize what something looks. So they decided they would do that drawing. It was not based on what we thought was what we wanted to do. But again, it was at a preliminary stage. I really don't, in the end, care about what they draw at that level because we're going to get to the end. Perfect example is that if you saw the original drawings of the Ahern, you came in that main thing and the library sits right off the main side there. They had a beautiful, round, sweeping wall, all glass and stuff like that. I looked at them and said, you're crazy? We're not spending money on doing that. We built square walls, glass panels, and we kept it, so that it worked on the inside, it worked on the outside, and kept taxpayers' money down. So I think, that drawing is not the drawing with the end. The building committee has already committed that this will look like a colonial building when we're done. It will have a pitched roof system on it. It will be a brick facade. It will look, what should look like as a nice colonial building in the end. So that's kind of our commitment to the town, and as taxpayers ourselves, what we would like to see as well. So I think, my pitch is basically, I feel we vetted this, for years now. We've gotten to the point where, other than maybe making some adjustments to size and to the overall cost, we'll have obviously much better numbers once we actually have a firm bid. On the process of bid, just so you kind of understand why this is different than any other project we've done, typically what we've done is gotten to a point of having a design and then asking the taxpayers, based on all of our cost estimates, this is what we think we're going to need. And then you kind of sit there and you pray. You go out to bid, and then you hope that the general contractor's numbers and all the file sub-bid numbers come in, and they're under that number. Because obviously if they're over, I can't do a thing. I have to go back to town meeting and say, even if it's over $50, I have to come back and say, I don't have the money to get that, all right? So typically what you do at this stage is you come up with the number that you think is your worst case number. And you're basically saying to the town, you're not paying more than this because I can't spend more than this. If you agree to that, then that's the rate we're going. The hope is, obviously, in any one of these projects, we bring it down. Because I'm doing it at this level right now with minimal information, but yet I want to come and be reasonable to you guys. I don't want to say that I can do it for $6 million if I don't think I can do it for $6 million. We have these added contingencies. By the time we actually come to town meeting with the final design that has been bid out by the contractors, I'm going to have a number. It's going to be the number. So you're not going to be asked to buy into a number that's still an estimate. It's going to be the contracted number. It's going to have very tight time frames. I have 30 days from the time I get those bids in to have a town meeting to either approve it or reject it. And if we approve it, we move forward. If we reject it, it's done. This is a process we've never done before, but it's to basically give the taxpayers the understanding of what the final number is before they vote yes. I obviously can't do that on the design side, because without the design, I can't get there. I can't get my bid specs, I can't get everything else. So I can't say, don't give me the 550, I'll just tell you it's going to be X amount of dollars. Again, that would be an estimate. I need the money to basically put together the final design, put together the book of all the bid specs that all the contractors are going to be looking at to come up with their numbers on, to come up with that firm number that I present to town meeting and says, this is the number to build the building. And the only difference on top of that would be the contingency, which you'll be able to see. We typically would give her that 5%, I said, that would sit there. And if we don't need that 5% because we hit nothing, that rolls into another project, or we can do whatever we want as a town with it. And if we need it, it's there, and I'm not coming back to the taxpayers to ask for that money, but you at least knew it up front when you voted, that was your worst case. So I think probably long-winded, but that's kind of where the building committee kind of morphed through this whole thing. It was from studies on how the building was going to be used, to studies on what the existing building looked like, to what we would like it to be and how we expect it to last for the next 25 years and how it should function, to how it has to fit on the site. The final piece I'll say to you is, as much as there was a hope that this would make it to May town meeting, it's virtually impossible to make it to May town meeting for a number of reasons. And it's not strictly that we're going to, the time's going to take for the design, but we do have to go through a planning board review, in which case a final drawing has to be really kind of rendered so that they can see what it looks like. We have to go through zoning issues, because this building, even the current one, does not comply to current zoning. So, we've got to go in front of different boards, which each one has 30-day windows and, appeal times and everything else like that. So there's no way to make it to May and virtually have it done time-wise. It's not even practical, it's not reasonable. However, we don't start now. Every day we wait is that much longer this whole process continues to take. So that's why it's been a push to get this thing going. Because realistically, in my mind, we won't be even going to a point of approval for at least 9 months. This could be another year before we actually get a shovel in the ground, just based on the process we're talking about now. And it's not going to get shorter if we wait 3 months. It's going to still be that year. So, the time frame here is really a matter of, we got to do something. Let's get this thing going. We're still going to have to do maintenance on the existing building to keep the people there until we can actually get a shovel in the ground. So, you know, from the building committee's point of view, this is, if, you know, we were asked to take a look at it, this is our best, you know, feeling as to where we should go with it as a town. And again, we're just nine citizens, we're not the end-all, be-all. But, you know, we believe this is the best money that the town will spend, what it will end up with. Either of you have? Billy, was that you want to add?
No, you've covered everything.
Where was the,
I
where are the
just
people
wanna-
gonna be during construction, the workers in the town hall?
We would have to arrange for space just as they did with the library. If you recall, the library personnel were moved over to the state hospital property, and we would have to secure space. And Bill's already looked at rental spaces as an option to even building a building, but to do that long-term would just be not cost effective. So I just wanted to cover 3 things quickly. Bill hit on them, but I just want to get into layout a little bit. Some of people have asked, why don't you just set it up with cubicles like this here? And Bill made a good point. But to reiterate on that, there's 2 reasons why you can't do that: privacy and security. We're required to maintain a lot of records. A lot of the records have private information like social security numbers, things like that. And the way it's set up now, it's just very possible that records are not taken care of the way they're supposed to. So we need the setup. In my office alone, with all the vital records, they have to be secure. They can't be accessible to anybody else. If you have a setup like this, other departments have access to records that I have to keep private for you. So that's why it can't be set up like that. And for privacy reasons, as Bill mentioned, a lot of you gentlemen here are probably veterans. You may want to go in and visit Mike Johns. If he's sitting in a setting like that, and you want to have a private discussion with him, you can't. The same reason why you wouldn't want to remove a lot of the meeting space. We need an area to talk to people privately. So it's very important that the setup is done in a fashion like this, okay? Also set up for this, Bill talked about natural light and all that kind of thing. My office is the only one in Town Hall now, you know where my office is, where there is no natural light. I can tell you, in those long days in February and March, where there is no natural light coming in at all anyways, a lot of times during the day, you don't know what time of day it is if you don't look at a clock. You come in at, at 10 o'clock in the morning, it looks like it's midnight, It really affects people's attitudes. It really is a big issue, and so to maximize that for all the employees is a big thing. Right now, in the summer, Vicky's been in my office, Bill's been in my office, there's no AC, there's no windows to put an AC, and if you're standing at my counter, people on the other side have the same problem. They go, geez, it's really hot in here. And that's why if you see me during the summer, I'm wearing polo shirts. If I dress like this every day, I'd be a sweaty mess by 10 o'clock in the morning. It's very important that you try to take care of all the employees and all of the people like you who come in to use the services in Town Hall. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because it's been an issue that's been raised and when we're dealing with some of the people in the AdCom, the questions they ask, well, wouldn't you like to save $3 million if we got away with the meeting space? Or we got away with the storage space and put storage somewhere else. Well, first of all, if you put storage somewhere else, you're going to pay for that. All right? My office alone, we tried to put a lot of records electronically, and we had a place where we would send those records for storage till it got, Marie decided at a certain point it got too expensive to store it off-site, so she stopped doing that. All right? There's a cost involved with that, first of all. But second of all, it's the convenience. If you wanted to come and get your marriage record or your birth record or death record, if we can't access it immediately, you're not going to be very happy. You're not going to want to wait. You're trying to get a passport. You're trying to do it today. You need that birth record today. You don't need it a week from now. So if we had off-site storage, it would just not be a convenience to the taxpayers. And so that's why we need that. In the meeting space, as we said, Bill mentioned they had a problem last night. They had a double booking. Each building has dedicated space for their staff for meetings. School has their own. Highway has their own area. Library has their own area. If you would say to us, well, you can have your meeting somewhere else. I've already talked about the privacy issues. It just doesn't work. even in the building we have now, in the space we have dedicated meeting area, we have more than one office looking to meet with residents privately at the same time, and you just can't do it right now. There's just not enough space in town to have those private meetings. So very important to have dedicated space for those meetings, and really ask you to come to vote, first of all, and we hope that you are supportive of the funds so that we can have the plans done correctly. Bill can get the numbers he needs to bid out the project properly. So, thank you.
Questions? Bill?
Yep, there's,
I have some questions that people have written down unless they'd rather just.
let's do some Q&A.
Here's the Q&A. You can read them.
Yeah, okay. The contractors are aware of the ceiling cost. Will they submit their bids accordingly to get close to that budget approval amount? I think that one we can direct the bill.
Yeah, I mean, what happens, you know, you think about it, okay, and it's part of the problem with working in the public sector in general. I was coming out of the private side, I never had to tell anybody anything, and I could basically get down to a number and negotiate the hell out of it before I actually decided if I was going to spend it or not. When you come to the public sector, obviously everything is done in open bids. It's very, you know, transparent. So, but, you know, the only beauty I will say in the building side of this is there's not one contractor that's looking to get this. There's not one electrical, you know, sub bidder who wants this work. There's not one window guy who wants this work. There are a number of companies that want this work. And I can give you a perfect example of this. We went out to bid on doing a generator to Taylor, just brought the bids back in. The bids went from the low bid of $133,000 to do a generator that will do that entire building, soup to nuts. Every piece of that building will be lit up in the need, you know, to use it, and it will become the town's new emergency center because it will be the only building in town that has that capability. The low bid was $133,000. The high bid was $213,000. So there is a competitive world out there that you're dealing with. The low bidder, who I've already met with and we've gone through all of their stuff, accounted for everything that they were supposed to account for. The generator is a good portion of the cost. It's probably close to $70,000 just the generator itself, but they got a lot of electrical pad work, you know, gas work and stuff that they have to go through. So when you look at it from that perspective, there is natural competition, even in the public side of it. And we see that, you know, we only had one bid on the library that actually met what our budget was. All the other ones were way above it. Think about that. They knew what our budget was, and they still came in above it in their final bid. Part of the problem is for them is the only thing that the general contractor controls is his side of it. The file sub-bids, which are your main mechanicals, your electricals and stuff like that, those are bids that are coming in independently. So, you know, whatever the lowest electrical bid is, the general can either accept them or not accept them, depending on whether or not they want to work with them or not. So that's how they build their bid. So the pricing, is, as much as you hate to be able to say out there, we think we're going to spend X amount of dollars, each one of those components that's going to happen within the building is competitive to a degree. And yes, they do have an idea of numbers, but like I said, it goes all over the place. And they don't just look at your numbers and say they can do it for your number and you know, think that they won on the deal. We've gotten bids back over the years on renovation work we did where people left significant amounts of money on the table compared to the other bidders. But they wanted to work. And they did the job, and you know, knock on wood, we've never had a problem that we haven't completed in this town, so it is a process that works.
Thank you. Well, this one's good. Who is in charge within the town?
That's a good question. I mean, you know, the building committee is, we're not an elected board, so we're an appointed board by the selectmen itself. So are we in charge? No, we're not in charge. We're responsible for managing the project itself and to reporting to whoever the project is for. On a school project, we report to the school committee and explain exactly what's going on during the process. During the library, we reported to the library directors on exactly what we were doing and what their wishes were. And there were a lot of things that they wanted to do, again, that, you know, may not have fallen into the way we wanted to do it, but we're working for them. So the building committee is not in charge in this project. We are basically the conduit that the town uses to do the projects. I mean, as far as who's really in charge, it's taxpayers number one, but then it goes down to town administration or individual building administration.
I just want to answer that a little bit as well. As you know, the building committee is appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So they've been charged to come up with information on this project. So the Board of Selectmen has entrusted that on the building committee. They've done a great job on all the other buildings in town. I don't know if you've any been into the library and see how that came out. That was all them. The Ahern School renovation, the high school renovation, all projects tasked to this board, and they've done a great job. They've been tasked to do the same thing this time. I think they've come up with a lot of good information. They've answered all the questions, and they continue to do a good job. That's been their role, and that is their role. And that's how municipal government works. The Board of Selectmen runs the town from a policy perspective. They have a town manager that does the day-to-day tasks. But it's other committees, and all of you have been on other committees, you've been asked to do the job. You wouldn't be too happy probably if you were asked to do a job and then your information was ignored, or someone else came up with other information and says, I think we should do it this way, even though they weren't the ones asked to do it. So they've been asked to do a job, they've done a great job, and we just ask you to, trust in their abilities, because they've shown on 4 or 5 projects already that they've been able to do the job.
You got a question, Bill, before we go?
Yes, I'm an architect. I've been an architect for 42 years. And I'm curious as to why zoning boards in Foxborough have the obligation or the right, as they did on the library project, to ask why are you using stone on the front door?
Well, I can address that one.
Okay.
I don't believe the library had to go in front of the zoning board.
I didn't either, but they did.
But, well, there were setback issues and encroachments, but it's not within their authority
Good.
to ask those questions.
I would agree.
Because they were dimensional relief they were seeking.
Yeah.
The town hall would need to go in front of a planning board for site plan approval,
Yeah.
which would, in very similar to the library, would require a design review, because it's what we call it within the design review district.
Yeah.
So they want to make sure that the building is going to have the character in the neighborhood, so that you're not going to get something that looks like a factory. You want to keep it colonial looking. So there's a lot of oversight, and that's not the zoning board, that's the plan. This would go through that. So there'd be a lot of input on how the exterior would look. You want to keep that, a lot of the colonial trim, I would imagine. So. And that's a public hearing, so it goes through.
I've got a question also on this, if I may, right now or not. Okay, on this building we see over here, are you salvaging any of the old building or not, or is this all new?
That's all new.
That's all.
Oh, good, that's, okay. I'm an ad hoc member of the ad hoc group, Dick knows me. I have felt from day one that you should tear down the existing building. Is that what you're gonna do?
Yes.
Great, okay. I'm curious though as to why this building, as shown over here, has gone through schematic design, and I've been to many town meetings, maybe not the town meeting on this, but I have yet to see an elevation, and I'm the author of the letter to the editor this week, asking about the architect's drawing for a new building. To me, it's god awful, as you said.
Absolutely right.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm curious, as an architect, whenever I design a building, one of the first things I do when I'm drawing the plan is to try to think in my mind, how is this building going to sit on the site, and what are the elevations? And yet, I've been following this job for a year and a half, and I have yet to see, the only elevation I've seen is the one in that god-awful elevation.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
Okay.
Okay?
Let me kind of feel that one. I think the issue here is, and as an architect, you know this as well as I do, I could take this building and from an exterior elevation, make it look exactly like our existing one. If
Exactly.
that's what the town wants to do.
That's what I want to see. I want to see
And I-
something that's going on
Again,
in his
we
mind.
never went that far because we don't feel that we've gotten all the bugs worked out of this. Whereas in the library project, again, we were going out to bid. So that was final documents. That was a design that you were going to see, it was going to be in your face.
Yeah.
It was all done. We're not there yet. But I agree, with the building committee, and again, I think Merrill can speak to this as well. We won't be happy unless this design looks very colonial, and in a lot of ways, very similar to what we have today. Will it have that grand front door? Probably not, because we don't have
On
inches
the
in that
side of
area.
the building.
But, you know, you know, as far as the moldings, the way the roof will be pitched, the, you know, architectural shingles on the roof, you know, all of that stuff would be what we would propose this building to be. You know, again, we were not in favor with the way the library design was, but, you know, we made our points very well known on that. But that's not our final decision.
Yeah.
You know, that's the town's decision, and whether they'll accept something. So we already know that that's the biggest, one of the biggest people, you know, issues that is out there, is that this needs to be a colonial looking, fit in the neighborhood, fit in the town, and that will be what comes back to town meeting, at least if we have anything to say about it.
All right,
Who
can
designed
we
that?
stick to the questions though, so that everybody has a chance to have
Okay.
their questions answered, just because there are a few more in the basket.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
this question is yours here. John, you have a question about
Which one is that?
the concept, schematic design,
Yes.
and design development.
Yeah.
So, we just addressed that.
Okay.
Okay, this just says several with a question mark, and it's from Mr. Heidecker, so. How many several?
Salad one.
Unfortunately, and another architect along with Jack. Let me just ask the question based on what happened last night and our discussion with Bill last night. The ad hoc group you've heard about, we've written letters and all kinds of things. Jack is a member of it. We don't agree internally on exactly which plan to go. Jack and some of the others have said the rental issue, the question of the old building, the question of do nothing is even in the mix. Bob Hickey and his thing on the rental. But the questions involved really are basically this. There are two plans presented by the architect of the town. The addition and renovation was claimed to be equal in cost, and because of many of the alteration and code items, the new building was preferable. The new building was preferable. The point is, there are two plans, and the costs are not equal. Not equal. If you dig into the estimates, there are problems in the estimates that are not recorded. Secondly, there's the issue that Bill and I have agreed on. If the building shrinks, the cost would shrink. Well, the building did shrink. We have the possibility of taking that addition plan, reducing it down below the size of this building, and coming up with a $5+ million price tag. People disagree on that number. You know, and it's rational, the disagreement. But so is the 8.6. That price is a year old to begin with, and we won't have a bid for another year. The 8.6, according to Randy, and all the bond issue costs, is 11.1. If you add in the departing department from the existing town hall, water and sewer, that's another $600,000, and you're appropriating $550. We're over 12 million. Let's stop talking 8.6 and realize what we're dealing with. Even the alteration and addition is not at 5. It's up at 7.5, 8 million by the time you get all the principal and interest and all the goodies in. So the dollar value is one thing that should be on this and heavily cited. And the question is basically, the ad hoc plan is exactly the same as the alteration plan that was presented to the town, through the building committee, and accepted as one of the two options to fly. The difference is, it is smaller. The difference is, you're using an existing shell, which is worth $1.3 million, just sitting there, according to the architect's estimate. So you're saving $3 million. So the question is basically, as we discussed last night, I'm in favor, my committee is in favor, we need to do something. I think we all agree on this. What it is, we still haven't determined. There are questions that have been raised on this. AdCom said, why do we need more than 10,000 feet? It's 17. There are those questions that need to be determined. The ad hoc plan is basically the same square footage in terms of office areas and everything else as this new plan.
Is there a question here, Dick?
There are several questions.
Well, we have several other questions. The point of this was for people to have, for the people who've done the work to be able to have an opportunity to present that. So I'm just trying to prevent like a dialogue, counterpoint.
I
I'd like to
agree,
really just
but I
get
think
to
the
questions.
problem is there is a broader discussion on this plan that has been alluded to in terms of TV presentations in front of the selectmen and other groups. And I'm
Excuse me,
saying,
but I think we're going so far beyond this right now with the people that are sitting in this room, that this is something that should be taken internally between you folks, because we could be here all day long, and we don't have that expertise.
I'm just gonna answer that, Vicki, if you mind.
Okay.
I kind of alluded to this a couple minutes ago in my discussion that if you were a sitting member of the Conservation Board, the Board of Selectmen, and you had a private group that decided to go out and say, we're an ad hoc group, and we've come up with this idea, and it's better than yours. Well, with all due respect to Dick and his group, I appreciate the information they supplied. They've had the opportunity to make presentations to the Board of Selectmen, to the board that's been appointed by the Board of Selectmen to handle the project. The information has been out there. The decision was made by this board to go with this plan. It was presented to the Board of Selectmen. There have been hundreds of meetings on this, and the Board of Selectmen has decided to go with this plan. So, in my opinion, to throw more information out there is just slinging mud. It's clouding the issue. This is the issue, okay? You wouldn't like it if you were a sitting member of another board and a private group of people came up and decided that we don't like what you're doing, so we're gonna do this on our own. The way to address that is, if you're not happy, is you vote somebody else into those positions, or you point somebody else to that position. That's how you address it. You don't get up there, you don't write papers, letters to the papers constantly, and you don't make allegations. There's a process. We're following the process. Board of Selectmen has asked this board to deal with it. They've dealt with it. They've made a recommendation. The Board of Selectmen has said, we agree with your recommendation, and they're moving forward.
Let me just add one other piece to that, and Dick's right in the end, what the final cost is gonna be is not the number we're talking about. It's never been on any of the projects. When you bought your house at $200,000, you didn't pay $200,000 if you mortgaged it. You probably paid $400,000 by the time you were done. That didn't stop you from spending $200,000, because that was the price that it was gonna cost to get into the house. And, you know, so again, I hope all of us are good taxpayers in the sense that we know whatever we pay for this project, if we're gonna bond it over 20 years, there's interest involved, there's bond costs involved, there's the things that you would typically do just like you would buy your house. That makes it cost more over 20 years, but it's time value of money, it's having the resource available to you, it's all of those things that come into play on that. So it is what it is, I'm not gonna disagree with what he's saying on it. But again, you heard within their own committee that they have a disagreement on, is it this plan, is it, you know, the renovate type of thing. And again, we were just a 9-member board that voted unanimously. No, you know, consensus within our entire group. We all felt unanimously that this is the way we should push forward. And I think that was, you know, that's kind of the important thing. And I don't dissuade anybody from the town having a different opinion, because quite honestly, that's what makes us look at things differently. But, you know, we only do what we're charged with. So I think that's the way we look at it.
One question I have looking at your plot plan there, and a great concern to me and many others. Are those the same trees in the front that you're showing? Are we saving the maples that are there? I heard that the presentation to advisory indicated you were going to move the building face 16 feet forward, which would require removing those age-old trees, and that would in my opinion, adversely affect the character of the building and of the neighborhood. And I'm sincerely hoping that you will make sure that the front of the building does not go any further towards South Street than the present there, so we can preserve those trees.
The reason,
Can I just add one? Again, this is a conceptual.
I understand, but if we get to town meeting and we've already spent $500,000 on a design, that's not the time we're gonna be able to say, oh, but we wanna save the trees. Those have gotta be conditions that are on the design. We need to know.
Well, you know better than anybody, Boyd, that this plan would have to go in front of your board.
I know.
For site plan approval, and those trees, that's bugging your crop, you could very well condition it.
I just want the public to know too.
yeah, but let me take that another step further. The reason this building by the architect, at least at this point, was set where it is there is a concern in doing construction back here at all, okay? So I think what they were saying in their mind was if we keep the whole thing in the area that we know what's in the ground, we're gonna eliminate long-term problems that could be down here. Now, we could maybe shift the whole building back here and not hit anything in here. We don't know that. We're gonna have to do some test pits and do some other things, which we have not done on this site. We haven't ripped up the driveway or parking lot at all to understand if we have a problem in this area. So I think, again, conceptually, what they were saying was, how do we know we can keep it out of our potential problem area? And it may be nothing back here. I mean, all I know is that at one point in time, there was an old school that they imploded, and a lot of it's buried here. I don't know how true that is. I don't know how much it is. I don't know anything.
Take it then that you were saying you are gonna cut down the trees, you're not considering saving the front of the...
No, I'm not saying that. If those trees, first of all, I think we've lost one of the trees, and they've planted a new one since, and we have one of the main ones that's still left there. If we can save the tree, no different than in the library. We tried to save a number of the big trees on there, but you know as well as I do, when the construction happened, we lost one of them. So we had to replace the tree. I mean, but there's certain things I can't control. But if in fact keeping that tree works with whatever issues we have here, with the amount of parking spaces we have to have, with everything else that has to fit on the site, if saving the tree is possible, of course we're gonna try to save the tree.
That's not an answer.
I think this is an important question. Today's audience is on a fixed income. Please explain the tax increases.
I'll explain that to you. Right now, Mr. Scollins, our finance director, has done projections for a budget. He feels that 6 million out of the 8.6 million or 6.5 million can fit within the current budget. So 2 million of that would have to be voted at a debt exclusion at a town meeting. And there are charts, we can make them available to you. You're welcome to get those. He's already done those. So we have them available if you want to stop by Town Hall, or I can make some available to Vicki if she can have them here. Then you'll be able to look at those. They're pretty detailed, but essentially, because of existing growth allowed in the budget, the 2.5%, as everybody hears that term thrown out there, and existing debt that is starting to fall off, he believes 6 to 6.5 million out of the 8.5 million would fit within the existing budget, and then the other 2 million would have to be bonded through a debt exclusion.
I think we ran over a little bit here on time, so if we just take one more question from the audience, somebody else.
I'll ask you one question. I think, having heard your presentation, which I wanted to hear before I said anything, you or whoever was responsible for putting this picture in the reporter may have made a mistake. Because somebody like me looks at that and thinks, oh, it looks like a prison or a military installation. I don't want to go in there, and I would feel badly for the people that would have to work in there. So what you're telling me is this is probably not going to be the end product by any means. And that satisfies me.
I don't know who put that in the paper. Sometimes the papers just do that.
Oh, right.
So, and it's a conceptual, and it's not the final design. Again, this is going to go through a number of boards, a number of changes. They're all going to have public input. Some of us just can't, here it is, and that's done. No, that's not the way it's going to happen. Okay?
kind of went to Daytime anyway, 'cause I went to night.